Today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new auto rifle Auric Disabler. This is a Strand 450 precision frame that was introduced in Edge of Fate and earnable only in Trials. Now I know many of my PvE players right now are saying hell no, but let me just say guys, considering the artifact mods that we have, the temporal mods that we have, Auric Disabler has a number of good rolls, not just for PvP, but also for PvE. So let's get into it. Firstly, taking a look at the stats, you can see here that pretty much across the board, Auric Disabler is the best in class when compared to other popular 450s. The only two stats it loses out in is aim assist and ammo generation, but just slightly. But this carries on the tradition of Trials weapons just simply being better when it comes to their stats. Now taking a look now at the perks, in the third column we have Gut Shot Straight, Dragonfly, Dynamic Sway Reduction, Hatchling, Lone Wolf, Slice, and Zim Moments. In the fourth column we have Desperate Measures, Kill Clip, Onslaught, Sword Logic, Tap the Trigger, Target Lock, and Tear. Now I know we have a number of different things to talk about for PvP, but I want to discuss PvE first. Keep in mind, this is a tiered weapon, so it can go all the way up to tier 5, and yes, the tier 5 is sexy. But let's talk that potency inside of PvE. In that third column, we gotta bring up Dragonfly. An old perk, but a perk that received a buff in Edge of Fate. Matter of fact, it received a buff alongside Chain Reaction and Firefly. Essentially, Dragonfly no longer uses weapon archetype scaling against combatants, but instead uses a unified damage scaler that is more normalized between different weapon types. Now, what this essentially means is that across the board, weapons with these perks just feel better because they do more damage. We can see here on a group of majors that the explosion damage deals 328 damage to an enemy when at 56 weapon stats. Now, this does scale with the weapon stats. As you can see here above 100, that goes up to 347. A solid perk, and when enhanced, this passively provides us +5 reload speed. Now, we have Hatchling present here as well for more strand synergy. This will spawn a threadling at a target's location by either getting a precision kill or 3 kills within 3 seconds. And this also has the added benefit of +5 handling when enhanced. Now, it's an okay perk. I will say it is weaker though, like compared to things like Bolt Shot, the Stabilizing Rounds, Incandescent. I know a lot of people don't think Hatchling as the equivalent to those perks, but it is the strand synergistic perk that falls within that threshold. Now, you can buff the damage of these threadlings with Thread of Evolution. I happen to be running a pure strand build, which is really nice. And this provides us 33% more damage from our threadlings. And it also causes them to move 30% faster, as well as travel further. Now, at 72 weapon stats, you can see that our threadlings deal 364 damage. But just like Dragonfly damage, when you crank up your weapon stats, that increases your threadling damage when created by Auric Disabler, going up to 378 here, with Thread of Evolution increasing that further to 503. I really like that the weapon stat itself plays into this. Now, sticking with our strand synergy here, we also have Slice. This makes it so that whenever you use your class ability, this grants you Slice for 9 seconds, where damaging non-severed combatants will cause them to become severed. Now, you may not care about sever, but let me just say, in things like Mythic Kepler, sever is very nice. It's a 40% reduction to enemies' outgoing damage. So it's great if you find yourself amongst enemies that absolutely shred you. So think things like contest mode, -40 deltas or above. Sever truly saves lives. Now, you're able to sever up to 5 enemies before the buff is ultimately removed. It's a solid perk with the caveat of making sure you use your class ability up anytime you go to proc it. Definitely easier on some classes more than others. I will say you don't want to utilize this if you're rocking a build with a low class stat. Now, on to our fourth column. We have Desperate Measures, which I know is a perk that you may overlook, but it's actually pretty solid on Auric Disabler. This one grants us a stacking damage buff, up to a maximum of 3 stacks, capping out at 30% damage. Now, you gain 1 stack of Desperate Measures by simply getting a weapon kill, which is a 10% increase, which lasts for 7.5 seconds. Now, to reach 2 stacks, you'll either need to get a melee or a grenade kill, which is really something to easy do here, at least with my current build. And this would give me a 20% buff. Then finally, to get 3 stacks, you either need to get another melee kill or another grenade kill, giving us a 30% increase in weapon damage. Now, something to mention is that the melee kill does not need to be a powered melee. Literally, your uncharged melee will also proc this. Now, all stages of the buff last for 7.5 seconds, but if you do get a weapon, melee, or grenade kill, this refreshes your buff timer all the way back up to full, meaning hypothetically, you could get up to 3 stacks and then you could stay at those 3 stacks at 30% more damage pretty much forever. Now, normally Desperate Measures isn't a perk we spend too much time on, but with the stat changes and just how prevalent both grenades and melee builds are currently, getting to those max stacks, in my opinion, has never been easier. You can literally throw 1 grenade and have a 30% damage buff right out the gate, with our damage buff being refreshed by just getting primary kills. But this takes us to our next perk, Onslaught. This is a good perk for both PvE and for PvP. What this does is with each weapon kill, you gain a stack of Onslaught, up to a max of 3 stacks, with each stack lasting for 5 seconds. Now, each stack also decreases the firing delay of your weapon and increases that rate of fire. Essentially, the first stack increases your rate of fire to 537 rounds per minute. The second stack increases it to 631 rounds per minute, and the third stack caps out at 720 rounds per minute. It's an old perk that goes way back to the days when Breakneck was first brought to us, but I would argue and say this version of Onslaught is even better, as it doesn't lower your damage like it used to back during the OG Breakneck days. Now, this also increases our reload speed per stack with plus 15, plus 25, and plus 35. It's a good perk, guys, and if you're rocking Actium War Rig, this is amazing, as you can just sit there and lay on the trigger non-stop. Next up, we have Sword Logic, another damage dealing option that grants a damage buff determined by the rank of enemy that you kill. So for example, if you kill a minor enemy, this is a 15% buff which lasts for 6.5 seconds. Elites is a 25% buff which lasts for 8.5 seconds. And if you happen to take out a mini boss, that's a 35% damage buff which lasts for 11.5 seconds. Now, in the off chance that you take out a boss, this is the biggest buff of them all at 50%, lasting for 16.5 seconds. Now, these timers can be refreshed with weapon kills, and it's tied to the amount of stacks you currently have. So for example, if we take out Carl and we get 4 stacks, any kill we get following that will refresh up to 16.5 seconds and will actually maintain that 50% damage buff. Now, I bring up the damage buff here because one of the mods we're going to be going over is Temporal Blast. This is the best volatile mod this season, and it's literally making every weapon that is a featured weapon an absolute monster. The beautiful thing about Temporal Blast is that it's not just the explosive damage that it grants you, but the fact that it scales with the damage of your weapon. Meaning, if you have a 50% damage buff, this will scale Temporal's blast damage with that 50% increase, meaning it too gets that buff. Now, granted, I know most of the time you're not going to be walking around with a 50% damage buff, but the point is, whether it's 25%, 10%, 50%, whatever, every one of these damage buffs are scaling the damage of Temporal. Now, lastly, for PvE, the perk I wanted to talk about is Tear. This makes it so that when you land a precision final blows, it causes nearby targets to become severed. Now, this causes a small explosion around the target, similar to Dragonfly, and any of the enemies that are caught in the blast will become severed. What I like about this perk is that it provides the same bonus as Slice in column 3, but it doesn't require the use of our class ability. And it can also sever multiple targets at once, rather than just one target at a time that we land shots on. The problem is that it takes up that 4th column perk, which is a bummer, but it does synergize pretty nicely, especially with our Strand artifact mods. Now, this takes us to our origin traits. We've got Fleet-Footed, Roar of the Battle, and Amalon Fluid Dynamics. Yes, if you have the tier 5 version, all of these are enhanced. Now, starting with Fleet-Footed, this is our Trials of Osiris origin trait, and it reads that dealing damage grants you a short window of increased movement speed and airborne effectiveness. Landing a final blow increases these effects. Now, when you deal damage, this will give you plus 15 AE, alongside the increased movement speed. And when you get a kill, that cranks it up to plus 30 AE, and even further increases to our movement speed. It's a solid perk for PvP, not really useful for PvE, although the movement speed is still pretty nice. Next, we have Roar of Battle. This lasts for 6 seconds, and it grants us increased handling and stability, but requires us to be in combat. Now, what this really means is that when dealing or receiving damage every 0.5 seconds for at least 2 seconds, this will then grant you the Roar of Battle. And lastly, we have our Foundry origin trait, Amalon Fluid Dynamics. This reads that the weapon has increased reload speed and stability for the top half of the magazine. So for that upper 50% of the mag, you have 20 stability and 30 reload speed. Now, this does decrease as you get closer to 50%, but it's really nice, especially inside of PvP, if you just want to start every engagement with just more stability. Now, this takes us to what we think is the God Roll in PvE. Let me just say, I love the idea of just full sending it and going Dragonfly paired with Tear. Now, I know this doesn't really seem to have any secret sauce or unique synergy, but I just like the idea of, hey, you land a precision kill, boom, you're able to proc 2 effects. One giving you the damaging explosion from Dragonfly, while also applying Sever to multiple targets. Now, you could swap out Dragonfly for Hatchling, especially if you're rocking some sort of Warlock Strand build that could take advantage of Thread of Evolution to make those threadlings even more deadly. Now, like we mentioned earlier, Desperate Measures, in my opinion, is a sleeper pick here. Considering the cooldowns of our grenades and melee builds, I actually have a roll with both the Dragonfly and Desperate Measures, and it performs quite well. At the same time, I can't overlook the classic Onslaught roll. As a matter of fact, you can do Onslaught with Dragonfly and stack it with Actium War Rig. I personally don't have that trait combination, but it's definitely one I'm looking for. Actium Guardian War Rig is buffing auto rifle damage this season after Bungie made the change to it. And even though, yes, you normally want to pair Onslaught with something like Subsistence or some sort of perk that feeds ammo back into the weapon, I think for the most part, you'll be just fine with Actium. Now, for our barrel mag perks, for PvE, I just like something that makes my weapon feel better. Arrowhead break is really nice. You got fluted barrel. Polygonal rifling is pretty good. For our mags, anything that can bump that reload speed, or even our mag size, whether it's alloy magazine, a pendant mag, flared magwell, or light mag. Now, before we get into our artifact perks though, to really round out the synergy here, I do just want to bring up Temporal Blast again. This is a very good perk, and whether you're utilizing it with a Strand synergistic roll, or even like an Onslaught or damage dealing roll, all of these can contribute to you getting stacks of Temporal Blast very fast. Hitting multiple targets with Dragonfly can grant you multiple stacks of Temporal Blast, increasing your damage of your weapon, whether it's with perks like Sword Logic or Desperate Measures. That scales the damage of Temporal Blast. And I would say this is one of the most unique things about weapons in a given season, or these temporal mods. I know a lot of people get hung up on the extra 10% more damage because it's a tier 5. That's nice, don't get me wrong, but it's these temporal mods that really make the meta. Now, in terms of our artifact mods that really stand out, you've got Threaded Blast, a very strong returning artifact perk that increases the size and damage of Tango Explosions when dealing strand damage to it. An S tier perk, guys, that takes our Tango Explosions to the next level. Now, you could pair this with Elemental Coalescence as well as Tangled Web. Elemental Coalescence makes it so about every 4 to 7 kills, you spawn an elemental pickup matching your super. So if you're leaning into a strand build, you'll be making lots of tangles. And then you have Tangle Web, which makes it so that anytime you create a tangle, this will trigger a suspending blast, adding even more crowd control. Then all you need to do after that is just shoot the tangle with Auric Disabler, and boom, for the most part, everything dies. Unless you're playing Mythic Kepler. And if that's the case, you're gonna need a lot more tangles, man. Now you can also make use of Elemental Overdrive. This grants us a 10% weapon buff for 7 seconds when we pick up a matching elemental pickup. Now this does somewhat contradict Threaded Blast, since you need to damage the tangle with the strand weapon to get the buffed explosion. Now we also tested to see if you can maybe like shoot the tangle after it's thrown to get the effect of both, but it doesn't seem possible. But I don't know, maybe it's a skill issue. But that's pretty much PvE, guys. I think it's a solid weapon, one I would definitely consider. I know every one of you is like, Cross, I'm not gonna put down Mint, and I get it, which takes us to PvP players. Let me just say, guys, I wish I could tell you this weapon is gonna change the meta. I wish I could tell you the combination of a 0.8 second base time to kill value, which at 160 weapon stat is 6 crits, 1 body, was enough to carry this weapon to the next level. The problem is really just the Crucible meta, and that's really what I want to bring up about Auric Disabler. It's got everything I would love on a 450. It's stable, it's got great stats, it's consistent, it looks dead sexy at tier 5. It's got combinations that are pretty quirky, like gut shots and target lock, which doesn't necessarily drop our time to kill, but it does allow us to get the kill in 5 crits to body. It's got Onslaught, which I love in 6v6. The problem is that the current meta, at least on PC, really rewards peek shooting. Everyone is sitting behind a corner with a hand cannon, and when they peek out, they immediately shoot, and then they peek back into cover. On top of that, because of the overwhelming melee spam that's happening inside of Crucible, you're not just having someone peek out and hit you with a single shot from a weapon, you're also having them peek out and shoot you, and then hit you with an ability. And then they turn around and hit you with another ability right after that. You see, 450s are really good when you have people that are actually squaring up out in the open in a 1v1. But that's not happening right now in this meta. Not really with any weapons. Our meta right now is the art of disengagement. Can I get the kill immediately? And if I can't, can I disengage to try again? That's literally our meta. Occasionally you'll find people that will square up, but for the most part, it's just not the case. No lie, TTK values for some of these weapons, even though 0.8 seconds sounds really good, either A, forgiveness is going to have to really be cranked up to give weapons like Auric Disabler a fighting chance, or B, Bungie does a pullback on abilities, because that right there is really going to catch you when using a weapon that has you planting your feet in the ground as much as this auto rifle does. I can't tell you how many times I've been hit by a number of AoE melees, whether it's Lightning Surge or Tempest Strike, and the fact that they can hit you back to back. Look, I know someone right now is going to say, Cross, just get good. But it's a sad thing that a weapon this beautiful, this wonderful, will never see the light of day inside of Destiny's PvP meta. Now, there are some weapons that are really changing the meta up in a way that I'm really liking. For instance, Aura's Neutralizer, a weapon we recently reviewed, is absolutely popping off. And that too is a Trials weapon. And that archetype is a really interesting archetype. And you can even see from the Trials report for this weekend, Aura's Neutralizer is right there at the top. But look at the bottom. Right there, man. Auric Disabler is trying. Like, seriously, guys, this weapon has the potential to be something inside of PvP. It's right there. It needs a nudge. And in my opinion, opinion, I think if it just got a forgiveness buff, that right there might be enough to take Auric Disabler to the next level. For the time being, the rolls that I would hunt for this weapon are pretty much your typical rolls you would see on a 450. Hammer Forge, high caliber rounds. I prefer high cal. Fourth column perks, Onslaught, Kill Clip, hell, even Target Lock if you want. But I will say this, out of all the rolls that I played with, I really liked Lone Wolf. I think Lone Wolf or even Dynamic Sway is your way to go, especially the enhanced versions of those perks. They help that aim assist, and especially Lone Wolf, that one was very noticeable when I used it. I felt like that perk, despite it being nerfed last season, is still such a good perk. Dynamic Sway is also a pretty good one, but it takes a little bit to get the perk fully amped. And by that time, the gunfight is concluded. I did try Gut Shot Straight with Target Lock because I wanted to see if we could get the kill in 5 crits to body and how consistent that would be. But even with the enhanced version of Gut Shot Straight, I don't know, guys, I cannot make it work, man. Yes, it increases your body shot damage, but it decreases your target acquisition just slightly. But I just gotta say, guys, I can't seem to hit anything with Gut Shot Straight. We tried multiple times. Matter of fact, most of these PvP clips are me trying to make Gut Shot Straight work, and I just can't make it work, man. Which is why I'm gonna say your typical perks, Dynamic Sway, Lone Wolf, maybe even Zim Moments, in combination with those PvP perks is the way to go. Now, in terms of temporal mods for PvP, you can go the route of just like extra range, really cranking that range up. And yes, you can reach almost up to 37 meters with both the range masterwork and a range mod. I will say though that Temporal Adapter is one of my most used mods inside of PvP. It states that readying the weapon grants it bonus stability and handling as well as reload speed, and it's a good duration. And you can actually use it on 2 different weapons and swap between the both of them, proccing the perk, giving yourself these benefits. I use it all the time on weapons like Auric Neutralizer, and definitely something you could utilize here on Auric Disabler. So guys, that is a review for this auto rifle. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right. Go.